welcome to 10 JRPGs that offended the world. These games were either too offensive for localization or became offensive for not being censored or altered when they came overseas. And today, we're gonna find out why, so let's begin. Number 10, Dragon's Crown. The developer Vanillaware has always been a bit controversial for its director George Kamitani's designs. Often we've seen over-the-top, super deformed or merely exaggerated characters within his games. However, nothing comes close to the incredible art style of Dragon's Crown, a great 2D action RPG and the company's best-selling video game ever. The artistic design of some characters, particularly the female ones, were so over the top they became extremely bizarre. And I'm not only referring to the Amazon and the Sorceress, two of the playable classes in the game. Their designs were ridiculous to say the least, but not in a bad sense. Part of the world, however, decided the exact opposite. A lot of people were deeply offended by these designs, but more so about some of the NPCs of the game. From one of the shop owners to, well, this. Ha! I always believed all of these drawings, poses and depictions were hilarious. I don't think they were meant to be taken seriously, but this game was released back in an era that was just beginning to get offended by pretty much anything nowadays. Sadly, because of the controversies of this game, Kamitani heavily toned down these exaggerations for later RPGs. Number 9, Mary Skelter Nightmares. The original Mary Skelter was released on the PS Vita in 2016. The localization of it happened in 2017 with zero censorship whatsoever. A year later, it was also released on Steam the same way. Of course, it's a compiled hard game published by Idea Factory. The dark and mature themes of the game weren't exactly the issue here. It wasn't even the portrayal of the female characters and their juicy transformations when they go berserk during battle, even though some of the girls looking very young and underage did raise a bunch of eyebrows. The most offensive feature of the game was a specific minigame it had. In here, you're supposed to rub the screen to, purge the girls from the pink and poisonous blood that has stained their bodies during combat. So yeah, remember those really young looking girls I mentioned? This also applies to them. I can't show you examples of those because that will deeply offend YouTube, of course, but you get the idea. The game got 2 direct sequels over the years. The first one had also the same minigame, but of course it was completely removed from the PlayStation 4 version. That's Sony for ya. Switch and PC still had it though. But by the time the third and final entry was released, the snowflake side of the world was so offended that Idea Factory was forced to remove the minigame entirely in all regions, in all platforms. The game was even banned in Australia, if you can believe that. In fact, the third entry was heavily censored in other areas as well. Link in the description for that. Number 8, Queen's Blade Spiral Chaos. This game is part of a big media franchise of adventure novels, mangas and anime shows, all featuring heavy, and I mean absolutely heavy fan service. Spiral Chaos is a strategy RPG that's been fan translated in English for quite some time. It never left Japan because even there it was seen as too ecchi or pervy for its own good that localization was never even considered. To be honest, it's quite raunchy for sure, but not as raunchy as the anime or the manga, and in terms of JRPGs, I've seen worse. It's just the type of game it is, with several sexual themes and innuendos between the characters, the clothes the girls wear, the boob physics, the still images and screenshots that are extremely sexy, etc. Let's not forget about the main character Jean, who is a lewd, good-for-nothing pervert, even though most of the girls don't seem to mind him. Several scenes and dialogue could be interpreted as suggestive in both ways, if you catch my drift. So the mere portrayal of most female characters is something that will never fly nowadays with any publisher whatsoever worldwide. Sad, cause this is a pretty fun game, but it's insanely hard. Number 7. Morimiya Middle School Shooting. That title says it all, huh? The software RPG maker has been around for a long time, so you can only imagine how many offensive games have been made by fans throughout the years. One that got some attention though was this one. It was made by some Japanese dude in 2018 for the MV engine of RPG Maker. The story follows a girl who walked into the bathroom one day only to see her mom killing herself. Her dad is alcoholic and one day he just abandons her. So she decides to take out her frustrations and loneliness in high school by, you guessed it, killing everybody. The game is a top-down view action RPG where you control the girl shooting students. The events are quite similar to school shootings famous in the United States, but it was also inspired by several infamous games such as Postal or Hatred. The game was so offensive that it wasn't released anywhere other than the MV engine I mentioned, which means it can only be played emulated on a PC. This game is just the tip of the iceberg of insanely offensive games that have been done with RPG Maker, but I decided to include it here since it got some attention, surprisingly. Number 6. Criminal Girls. Originally released on PSP only in Japan, the game was later remade for the PS Vita and PC, and we did get those versions. Similar to Nier Skelter, this one offended the world because of a specific minigame, but also for its highly controversial themes and depiction of certain characters. In other words, the offensive nature of this one was far worse. You see, in this game, you play as a jail warden who's supposed to lead some female prisoners out of the jail since it's been infested by monsters. Some of these prisoners look like little girls, as you can see here, so we have that to start with. But next is the minigame, one in which you're supposed to motivate the girls so they can learn abilities. To motivate them, you have to sort of like punish them with the touchpad or the mouse. Yeah, I won't explain anything further to avoid the evil lord's punishment from YouTube for this humble YouTuber, but you get the idea, right? And even though this game was so stupidly offensive, it was banned in New Zealand and also banned from live streaming on Twitch. The localized versions of it are censored, believe it or not. Pink fog or mist was added to the minigame to restrict the player's vision when motivating the girls, and their moaning was replaced by just heartbeats. Weird. A sequel was released exclusively for the PS Vita this time. They didn't even bother releasing it in Australia, but now it was banned in Germany. Despite some of the dialogue being removed for its localization during the minigame and the artwork being made less explicit, the game met the same fate as its predecessor, offending half of the world out there. Number 5. Princess Minerva. This game is a comedy, a really sexy one, but like most games of this kind back in the 90s, it stayed in Japan. The lack of a localization though may have been primarily because the game was just too obscure even in Japan. It was released for the NEC PC 98, later ported to the PC Engine and the Super Famicom. An OVA was released based on it, which serves as a prequel which the world did get. But another reason why the game stayed in its country of origin was the insanely funny depiction of the girls and their dialogue. Being an all-female cast of mostly overly sexualized ladies and a kid traveling amongst them, so yeah, their outfits are quite revealing to say the least, but the humor could be considered as ultra-offensive back then, just as nowadays. This never got released back then anywhere else, and it will definitely never get released nowadays. But it's been fan-translated for a long time, thankfully. The thing about the dialogue and the humor is that the girls could be seen as very objectified, especially by a large amount of NPCs when they see them, but sometimes it is the girls themselves that speak crudely or utilize mannerisms that will offend the hypersensitive West. Anyways, this is a fun and silly game, but with tons of personality, humor. Just keep in mind it's a grindfest. Number 4, Stellar Blade. It's a South Korean action RPG, not a Japanese one, I know, but how can I leave out the utterly successful game from last year that offended everybody merely for being too sexy? It's the poster child for offensive RPGs, and offensive for me nowadays means cool and interesting. There's not much explaining to do considering how widely covered this case was. The fact that it was so recent also contributes to that. There is nothing offensive with the story, dialogue, characters, or events in the game, only a bizarre graffiti that Sony altered for whatever reason. It was allegedly the portrayal of Eve, the main character, whose 3D model was based on a real model with similar body proportions, by the way. It's a video game, so of course these were exaggerated a little bit, but still, nothing as outrageous as several other JRPGs out there. As a result of the backlash, Sony censored some, but only some of the sexy outfits, while strangely leaving others that I think are far more revealing intact. So yeah, this game is nowadays perhaps the most well-known case of being super offensive for the dumbest reasons ever. Number 3, Drakengard 3. To date, I'm still not sure how this game got away with its crazy shenanigans. Square Enix localized it themselves worldwide as a PS3 exclusive with no censorship whatsoever. Not only is it extremely violent but also sexy, which back then was still alright, apparently, but the plot, the character interactions and the dialogue was so inappropriate, I'm shocked the ESRB let it fly under the mature rating. The protagonist Zero is on a quest to kill all of her sisters after being betrayed by them, sisters that have each a male sexual slave to satisfy their lust. Zero herself isn't stranger to this though, as she also implies several times with no filters attached that she's done it before and will continue doing it. Of course, all of this is done in a humorous way, as you can see in this other screenshot. It isn't meant to be taken seriously, it's supposed to be funny, and well, it's Yoko Taro. What do you expect? The game wouldn't cause as much controversy as Nier Automata did with the beautiful depiction of its female androids, but it sure offended a gazillion players and parents out there. Forget about a modern remaster of this cool and broken-ass action RPG, it's just as messed up as the original Drakengard on PS2. I didn't include that one here because it was full of censorship and I already talked about it in another video. But anyway, now that I mentioned Nier, Number 2, Nier Gestalt. Another one by Yoko Taro, master of offensiveness. This one was even more obscure back then than the Drakengard series, what with it being a spin-off of them. So it caused some controversy and offended some people, but it wasn't a big deal. At least not until Automata came out and was extremely successful, and as a result, millions of gamers went back to play this one. When they did, some of them found out about the character Kaine and her gruesome origins. Her entire dialogue included lots of swearing and self-objectification, but not without insulting anybody who ever mentioned it. However, it is her plot twist that earned her the controversial nature and offensive status. I won't spoil it, but let's just say her body isn't normal, victim of a natural genetic mistake that does exist in this world. Well, apparently that was so offensive that Square Enix decided to tone it down considerably or completely for the remake a few years ago. She still has her super edgy dialogue and personality, apart from wearing that very revealing nightgown, but her backstory and a specific part of her body were altered. It is no longer explicitly implied in this remake why she was bullied when she was little. It's confusing now. It's like Square Enix didn't know who this backstory was going to offend, so they just altered it. Well, if you want to know what the hell I'm talking about, you're gonna have to play the game for yourself. It is highly recommended. Number 1, the Persona series. The original Persona series met several controversies throughout the years. That is until Atlus bent the knee to political pressure and started self-censoring or altering their original games in their remakes or remasters. But back then, almost every single title offended half of the world. It was always just one or two small things or funny scenes, which is why I decided to cover the entire series instead of just one particular game. The bizarre Americanized changes of the original PS1 Persona game is a topic I already covered in another video about censorship. The changes offended gamers, and in this case for a good reason. They just altered stuff to give a more American personality to it, which was stupid. But then Atlus Japan released Innocent Sin on the PlayStation, a sequel. A game that featured a very interesting plot. You see, the bad guys are supposedly trying to resurrect their leader from World War II. It's pathetic that I can't even pronounce his name anymore without suffering YouTube's wrath, but you know who I'm talking about. There was also a teacher taking their own life. You can find a fan-translated version of this original PS1 release that has been out there for ages. Or you can play the completely censored remaster on PSP that we did get, which made a joke out of the main antagonist, altered dialogue and removed several lines and mentions. The Japanese release also includes all of this silly censorship. Because the original, as you saw, was considered as too offensive. Another case is Persona 3. The original PS2 releases had several drug-related implications. Some taking your own life stuff, smoking, objectification, blah blah blah, and a scene at the beach where our three male heroes encounter a trap. A comedic scene that offended some people out there. Last year, Atlus released the snowflake version of it in the form of a remake with all the aforementioned stuff completely altered or changed. Persona 5 also had a similar fate, but not as harsh. When it came out, there was a funny scene with some dudes hitting on Ryuji and the protagonist that was deemed as extremely offensive. There was also a rising sun flag somewhere out there, which apparently also offends people nowadays. All of that removed for the royal release, including in Japan. So yeah, as you can see, the Persona series used to offend the world every so often back in the day. I'm surprised how much controversy they caused as opposed to the Shin Megami Tensei series. Those games are far more controversial, but they have barely offended anyone out there, because there's nothing offensive about them. So those were the 10 most offensive JRPGs ever made, but I get the feeling there are some crazier examples out there that only Japan got. If you know some, make sure you mention them in the comments. Thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends. See you next time!